Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of me versus some random guy. Except today, this isn't a random guy. This is a guy that I've played before, and in fact, he is in my previous video. This is AlliedPro TerrorRabbit. So, he's using an army pretty similar to last time, except besides the Black Bear, he now has a unit of French Marines, in addition to some Yarikachi, and he's now brought some cavalry, so it looks like he's learned from last time. Not only has he brought Yariki, 2 units, but he's also brought some carbine cavalry, which will cause me some headaches later. Meanwhile, I have a bunch of line infantry with some experience, and I also have some French Marines. In addition, I have 2 units of Yariki. No, I take that back. I finally got saber cavalry. So I got those. Better melee attack, but not as good of a charge bonus, and not as good against cavalry as the Yariki. And then finally, I have my cannons, which I tend to just leave out here on their own. If they want to come after them, they can.
Sweep them from the field!
So right off the bat, we both have access to these cliffs here, which I set up on mine. He ends up setting up on the hill opposite. Doesn't really try and take any of the buildings. My plan was to race to the top and take a position on the edge of this cliff here while I sent down a unit to take this building and a unit to take that building. That way I could cover them. Turned out to be a non-issue though, because he didn't really try and take the buildings. Meanwhile, I see his cavalry is coming down the side here, so he's going to try something. At the very least, I figured he would try and go after my cannons, so I bring out my saber cavalry. So he turns his Yari, and he brings them directly at my saber cavalry. At which point I pull them back, and we start to play some back and forth games here. Pulls away, seeing that my infantry is lined up here. And I managed to get a few shots off. But his carbine cavalry makes it up and starts to shoot up my poor cannons.
Moving out!
There's really not a whole lot my saber cavalry is going to be able to do against his carbine cavalry. And in addition, he has more Yariki coming up. So we play more back and forth games. Hey, fancy that, he just logged into Steam.
Your men are routing, sir!
The second time when I played him, he friended me apparently, so there you go. So I managed to get some shots off at his Yariki again. My guys somehow keep from running away, and I end up shattering his unit. So for him, he ends up with just a unit of carbine cavalry left from his beginning total of 3. Meanwhile, on the left flank here, I've captured this building with my Marines. I decided to send them in to actually do the building capturing since they tend to be a bit tougher. And my men are just lined up here on the ridge. Things get a little bit boring here as we both just sort of take up positions, and I just start to take these 2 buildings without being contested. He does get a few pot shots off on my cavalry though, because not a whole lot I can do about that. So let's fast forward. So I start generally just moving my troops to the edge of the cliff to cover my marines. But then eventually you see I change my mind and I start to move my men off the cliffs, because clearly he's not going to come to me, so I'm going to have to go to him. Brings down his carbines, takes a few pot shots. Not a whole lot I can do about it until I finally move up some line here. So here on the right, my marines that are capturing this building are starting to form the right side of my line, which eventually will stretch down the middle here. I decide to move up some units here to take some pot shots at his carbine with decent success. So now you notice his rightmost flank is pretty much unprotected other than by some carbine cavalry, and I also still have my 2 units of depleted saber cavalry that I can bring up and try and distract him. So his right flank is looking like a good point to hit. At this point, however, he decides to start moving his men up, which I'm not sure why he does that, but it gives me the opportunity to get the first shots off. Looks like he's concentrated most of his strength in the middle here. He has a lot of his line units, but they're not spaced out, so they're not really maximizing their fire, and his general blunders into the middle here, so I managed to take out most of the unit. Here he's sending in his spear units to crash into my line. But they don't last much beyond the point of contact. So at this point his right flank is starting to break up. I brought my cavalry in.
You have triumphed over the enemy!
Beyond that point, once his right collapses, his left collapses. And that is pretty much it. Meanwhile, I'd brought in a unit here on the flank. In theory they were going to do something, but they never made it to the battle.